Hey, this is Notser, and I want to talk about quality of life changes to World of Warships. The game in the background is the Shimakaze on the map Tears of the Desert, and this game is pretty good. Hopefully you'll enjoy it if you don't enjoy me talking about the game. So, the first skill, Expert Loader. Those of you who have watched my skills and my patch previews know I just don't think this is a competitive level 1 skill. Situation awareness, basic survivability, basic firing training, all are better. And you can't really decide between skills if one is just lagging behind. And what makes Expert Loader bad, in my opinion, is not the 50% reload. Obviously, that's good. It's the requirement that you're fully loaded with your ammo. So it's asking you to sacrifice DPS for a more optimal ammo. Well, why don't I just fire whatever ammo I have at the more optimal target? Where in ships, I have the freedom to select different targets that are in range. And that's my problem with it. So what I would propose is that Expert Loader doesn't require the ammo be fully reloaded in order to benefit. What it's going to do is it's going to allow you to swap ammo freely, and it's going to be the same reload cycle. So if it takes 30 seconds to reload AP, it will take you 30 seconds to reload the next ammo. Whether it be HE, AP, HE, HE again, AP, as long as you have decided before it's fully armed, you will benefit from the skill. You're not gaining any extra DPS in the sense that it's not doubling your rate of fire. If they didn't have that caveat that it requires you to be fully armed, then what you could do with the current Expert Loader is just swap back and forth at a point and gain a faster reload. You wouldn't want that either. That would be insanely broken. But at least this way, the overall rate of fire does not change of the guns, but it allows you to be more precise with the ammo you're using in each scenario, as long as you pay attention enough to swap it before it's fully armed. I like it. It doesn't make it broken. It's putting it on the level of situation awareness. It's changing the way you play the game, but it's not breaking the game. You still have to have understanding of what to use in what scenario. Alright, so the next one, fire prevention. You could probably predict this. It's just a bad skill. 7% is not enough to justify the 2 points, plus it's not even 7%. It's much more complicated. It's modifying a number that is modified by a number that's modified by a number. You have the chance to light the target on fire. Let's say a Japanese cruiser, 20%. Okay, well, different ships have a different percentage to be lit on fire, and this number changes if you've been lit on fire in that part of the ship. So, a ship that has been receiving a lot of HE damage will take less HE damage over a certain time in that particular part of the ship. So yeah, we're getting into territory where you're going to have to do a lot of math just to understand the benefit to the player, and at the end of the day, it's just not enough anyway. I propose we change it to be a percentage mitigation of fires and flood damage. Obviously, the name would have to change, but the idea is anytime that you have a fire or a flood on your ship, you will take less damage than you would normally if you did not have this skill. I don't know the percentage, maybe 20%. So that would make a 1,000 damage per second flood be 800 damage per second. I can deal with that. That feels pretty good to me. I don't know about you, but the player who was able to land the torpedoes still benefits from a dot over time, damage over time. But the player who has picked up this skill also sees a noticeable benefit. It doesn't really overlap with Last Stand, and it sort of provides the same bit of protection as Last Stand, aka it's now competitive at level 2 with the other skills. I really like that idea, that you can make something that is really targeting a battleship and a cruiser, whereas Last Stand is definitely targeting a destroyer and a lightly armored cruiser. Maybe like an Atlanta would benefit from Last Stand, right? And I think the best part about this is it's easier to understand. I know what I'm getting immediately. I'm going to take 20% less fire and flood damage. Now the next skill is just a case of the game mechanics changing too much for it to be relevant. Dogfighting Expert. This skill is basically described as allowing a lower tier fighter group to compete against a higher tier fighter group by a percentage of tier difference. So for instance, if I have a tier 7 fighting a tier 10, that tier 7 is going to get 30% more damage fighting the tier 10 fighters. And this was very relevant when tier 7 had to take care of a tier 10. It's no longer relevant though, because tier 10s fight tier 10s, tier 9s fight tier 9s. The only time you actually benefit from this skill is if it's a 4-carrier game, 2 per side, you are the lower tier, and you are fighting the higher tier aircraft carrier fighters. That's the only time you benefit from the skill. It's 3 points. That's way too many points to just dump into something where you're going to see it maybe 10% benefit. So my proposal is related to fighters, just increase the width of the manual attack range. This is a skill that you can use to break apart the enemy as they're doing an attack run. It doesn't really see a lot of use, quite honestly. It is used, don't get me wrong, but the instances when you can use it are not as often as you would like. You have to sacrifice a lot of ammo in order to perform this, and it does damage to your friendly aircraft. So you don't want to do it if there's a chance you would take out a friendly. Plus, the higher you go, the faster the aircraft. It's easier for someone to be a little bit lazier and move out of the way. This would help those players who would like to counter the balls of squadrons attacking, but it wouldn't just immediately increase the DPS. Now, one issue with this Notser, it's called Dogfighting Expert. It's not called Anti-Torpedo and Dive Bomber Expert. Well, you're right. But I really don't know how you change the fighter gameplay without just giving a buff to the person with the skill. I don't like that. I find that very boring. If they made Dogfighting Expert just a straight buff to all of your fighter groups, why would you take anything else? You could get by with one fighter group where the other person has to get by with 2. I would much prefer a scenario where it changes the way a particular part of the carrier gameplay works, and it's competitive with something like lower cooldown on damage control, because that is useful. You do find yourself having to deal with fires and floods. You cannot attack or return your squadrons without your decks clear of fire. Plus, fires increase the detection for the ship. That's a very important skill, and a lot of aircraft carrier captains are taking it over Dogfighting Expert because right now it's completely irrelevant if you're the top tier, and there's only one very specific scenario where you actually see a benefit. So now we're going to get to level 5. Level 4s are fantastic. They're all competitive. There's nothing that needs to be changed with level 4, but level 5, there's a lot of bad skills. Last Chance, for instance. Last Chance right now gives you a 30% buff to reload on both your torpedoes and your main battery if you're under 10%. That's insane. You're never going to benefit from that. It's just too tiny. I would much prefer that the window be higher, maybe even 30%. I have 20% here for 20% improvement to all systems. And when I'm saying all systems, I'm saying all systems. You can fight fires better, fight floods better, the rudder is more responsive, the propulsion is more responsive, your guns reload faster, your torpedoes rearm faster, your consumables rearm faster. This needs to be really strong for the tiny window it provides. Obviously you can change the percentages, but I just think 10% is way too situational. I'll play 100 battles and I'll be left under 10%, maybe 10 of those games, if that. That's just too tiny. I think the window needs to be wider and maybe the buff needs to be smaller, but it needs to be a buff. It needs to be competitive with concealment. It needs to be competitive with all the other skills at level 5. It's just not competitive right now. There are far better skills, and you need to remember you can only take one level 5. There's no way you can take more than one. So it needs to be outright better for your class, for the scenario you're looking for. Last Chance just isn't there. Now, another skill at level 5 that's pretty underwhelming, Preventive Maintenance. Now, they recently buffed it from 35% to 50% reduction in chance for the module to be incapacitated. Fantastic. Well, guess what? That's not competitive with concealment. It's not competitive with secondary battery. It wouldn't be competitive with a Last Chance that improved the performance of the entire vehicle, and it's not going to be competitive with the last skill that I'm going to suggest a change for. Now, just to make sure everyone understands, modules have health in this game. Modules absorb damage that is meant for the ship if you hit directly on that module. For instance, if you're using AP and you're a battleship and you focus down the module of the enemy ship, it will absorb that damage into the module. The module will lose its health, and if it reaches 0, it should be destroyed. But that damage does not go on to the target until that module is completely destroyed. Then it basically acts as if it's not there. That's the general idea of modules. So my proposal is that you increase that health pool for all modules by a percentage. I don't know the percentage. It needs to be fair. It needs to be competitive though. And this would address one issue I have with the game, where you feel like you play a class of ship and you don't really get a chance to play it. You lose your turrets in the Soviet destroyers, US destroyers, maybe your battleship, and you only have 3 turrets. Well, you lose 2 of them. And that really sucks, especially when you lose it so early in the game. You honestly don't have to work that hard to take out a turret if you're a battleship and you focus it down. It's surprisingly easy. So this change wouldn't be too strong, but it needs to be competitive for a US destroyer or a Soviet destroyer to decide to take Preventive Maintenance over concealment. Because right now concealment is just so good. My gearing is so powerful with concealment. It allows you to ambush every single class of ship in the game. Even the Shimakaze. They're nearly identical on their detection. And to have the ability to mutually detect each other and be so much more powerful than the Shimakaze in close proximity is a little overpowered at times. It feels broken. So this skill has to be competitive with that skill in order to make people really think, do I want to take this skill over concealment? I am giving up a little bit of detection, but I'm gaining more health on my main battery modules, which will allow me to do more damage and be more effective. So, for my final proposal, Jack of all trades. This skill is just not competitive. It reduces the reload time on consumables by 15%. Now, Notser, you would say, well, that sounds really good. Yeah, except for 90% of consumables are a charge-based system. So you're not waiting on the recharge of a consumable, except for damage control. You're waiting on whether this is the right time to justify that charge, and it's even worse if you're not using a premium or superintendent. If you're not using either one of those skills, you're not going to do this. You've only got 2 or 3 charges. Are you kidding me? You're not waiting on the cooldown. You have to justify those 2 or 3 charges. That's all you've got in the game. So my proposal, let's make it a percentage increase in consumable duration. Damage control immunity, a little bit longer. Defensive fire lasts for a little bit longer. Smoke, you put out smoke a little bit longer. For the heal, you benefit a little higher percentage on the return to your health. So if you're only getting 15% of the damage taken, maybe you get 20% of the damage taken back. This would just work better for a charge-based system if you might have someone who says, but Notser, wait, if it takes longer for defensive fire to fall off, then that means the cooldown for the recharge is going to take even longer. They could just take the time off of the cooldown that they've added on to the duration of defensive fire. They just need to make Jack of all trades just that, Jack of all trades. It has to be a skill that pretty much everyone would want to use, but other level 5s will allow a little bit more precise direction if the player so chooses. Right now, to me, concealment is the Jack of all trades. It provides a benefit to every single class. Now, is that benefit better than another skill? Probably not. Air superiority is pretty good for an aircraft carrier. Battleships who love secondaries would obviously take the manual AA. But the skill has been irrelevant for the entire existence of the game. You would not take this skill. But now you would. I definitely would take this skill if it made all my consumables more valuable. Yeah, definitely. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion. You can obviously tell me what you think in the comments. I was going for a skill that was balanced. I did not want them to be broken. That's why I left the percentage and not a suggestion in most cases. By the way, look at this game. We earned more base XP than anyone, either side, and we lost. Imagine how much we would have earned if we won. We'll survive. It was a great game. It doesn't matter that we lost that game. I enjoyed my time with it. I hope you did as well. I hope you have a fantastic day. And I'll catch you next time.